What's up everyone, the first ever Ultra League limited format Weather Cup is starting later today, so let's get ready for it. First, let's take a look at the meta, and for that I've created this extremely professional infographic. I know it looks like a big mess right now because it is, but don't worry, I'm gonna break it down for you. Starting with the absolute basics of a Weather Cup, the type restrictions. Only water, rock, fire and ice types are allowed, and on paper these types have some very simple interactions with each other. Water is the absolute king, beating all three typings. Ice is the absolute loser, losing to all other three typings. Rock beats fire and ice, and then fire beats ice. So on paper, really, why would you use anything other than water types, right? Well, that is because luckily within these groups of typings there are some Pokemon with unique subtypings that allow them to maybe break the mold a little bit, which we'll get into later. First, let's talk about the largest pool of Pokemon, the water types. There's a ton of viable ones for this format, and in this blue circle over here I've outlined some of the most meta ones, but there's definitely more possible. On the left here, this whole mess is basically just your basic water types. They do what water types do. They have their own unique interactions within this group, and also some have some unique interactions with outside this group, but in general they're just regular old water types. I'm not going to go too in depth into them because I want to go in depth on all of them. It's going to be too much time, but some I want to highlight are Gyarados, Kingdra, Jellicent, and to a lesser extent Milotic and Poliwrath, because they all have a different typing as their main damage source. They don't really use many water moves. Kingdra and Gyarados in particular do very well against other water types because they're able to output that hard-hitting Dragon Breath damage. Jellicent is very good versus other water types because it can hit with Hex and Shadow Ball. Milotic also has Dragon Tails to hit other water types quite hard, whereas like a Blastoise just doesn't do too much back with Water Gun. And Poliwrath hits everything quite hard with Mud Shot, well not with Mud Shot, but Mud Shot, and then in combination with that fast Dynamic Punch, it does very well versus some of these other water types. The real water type killers are over here though. The real water type killers are over here. We got Ludicolo, which you can run with Razor Leaf to just completely obliterate all the water types, but you could also consider running Bubble. It does make it a little less consistent versus opposing water types, but you do get a charge moves very quickly, and that can help you win some of these other matchups down here, but we'll get into that later. Lantern, another water type killer, except if we're talking about the mud boys like Swampert, but a Lantern with Spark, Thunderbolt does very well here. I put Tentacruel here. It's not really a water type killer, though it is similar to like Gyarados and Kingdra, where it doesn't really do much damage with water type moves. It mainly relies on Poison Jab and Acid Spray, just completely immobilizing everything. But it is unique because it's a water type that beats Ludicolo. If you want a water type that beats Ludicolo, Tentacruel is almost your only option, and that's why it's here. And Lantern, of course, also beats Tentacruel, but Tentacruel also gets walled by like this thing, Jellicent, and Empoleon does very good against it. Swampert, of course. Politoed does very well. Tentacruel is going to be a good player for sure, but it does have some very hard counters, even in its own group. All of these water types, of course, destroy the fire types, which is what we're going to be talking about next. Unfortunately, there's much less viable fire types out there. Really only two, Charizard, Blaziken, and even they are quite niche. That's just what happens when, you know, the most OP typing is water, and then the second most OP is rock. Fire types just get pushed out of the meta. I would say Blaziken is quite viable though, probably the only real viable fire type in this meta because of the fighting subtyping and counter. It does quite well against the rock types, which we'll be talking about next. But yeah, all the rock types that will be coming here, we'll lose to Blaziken, which is very good. And it also does quite good versus Ludicolo. No matter what moveset Ludicolo runs, Blaziken is able to beat it. The most tough moveset will be something like Bubble plus Hydro Pump. But I would assume that Ludicolo, even if it runs Bubble, would run Ice Beam and Leaf Storm, which means all the charge moves are still resistant. And Bubble is not that strong, so you should be able to just counter plus Blast Burn through that thing. Besides that, because it runs counter, it actually can put in some work versus some of the water types. Versus Samurott, Swampert, a Poliwrath, and Polion, for example. It can at least put on some damage, but it will still get one-shot by a charge move, of course. So in order to have any play in these matchups, you need to have shields up. Charizard will be alright as well. I would say it's going to be usable. It's the premier ice type counter, really. Except for some ices. There's some water ices, of course, which we're going to talk about later. Charizard's not that great there, but versus like a Bulbasaur, Alolan Ninetales, Charizard's very, very good. Really the best counter. It's also okay versus like a Kingdra. You could consider running like Dragon Breath, and with that, be quite flexible. But overall, unfortunately, I don't think Charizard will be that good, as well as any other fire type, really, sadly. Which is, of course, partly because of the rock types, and even though there aren't that many, they are all real threats. Of course, they beat the fire types, they beat the ice types, and in Cordeli's case, you also beat the water types because of the part grass typing, which makes Cordeli, I think, the undisputed king of this meta. Of course, because of the grass subtyping, you also do worse versus the ice types, but you can still hit them hard with the Stone Edge. So Cordeli, amazing generalist in this meta. Very little hard answers. The hardest answers probably being Blaziken and Alolan Sandslash, which is an ice type. We'll talk about that later. They are really your only actual answers. Besides that, it basically beats everything. The water types included. The other rock types also. The other rock types also have a lot of play still, though. I really like Terrakion in this meta as double kick now, and Sacred Sword, which you just get to so quickly with double kick. And because of that, you have some play versus even the water types, because you just outspam them. Don't expect to beat them, but at the very least, it's a rock type that does have some play against the water types as well. Lycanroc is quite interesting. I'm not sure if it's going to be that good, but it has counter, it has Psychic Fangs, has Stone Edge. Definitely has some potential. Regirock as closer could be super interesting too. You can even play around with the moveset here, because it can run so many good moves. Stone Edge, probably mandatory. Then Earthquake, probably not that useful, but could be used to like one-shot a Blaziken. Focus Blast, likely what you're gonna go with to hit like Cordeli very hard, or the other rock types. But then you also have Zap Cannon. If you want it to be a closer, you can also take out water types. Zap Cannon could be quite interesting there, but then you lose Cordeli, of course, which I don't know if that is worth it. Overall, these three rock types seem a bit niche, but definitely usable. Cordeli, though, is gonna be, if you have it, the ultimate Pokemon to run, and if you don't have it, the Pokemon you should be countering. One of the best Pokemon to do that is an Ice type, Alolan Sandslash. Because of its Steel Ice typing, it resists all the grass moves Cordeli can throw at it, and you only take neutral from the Stone Edge, whereas you're doing super effective damage back with the Ice Punches, and potentially also with Powder Snow. However, I do think Shadow Claw is the way to go here on Alolan Sandslash, just because then you have a little more play versus some of the water types, where you're doing neutral now instead of resisted, and in Jellicent's case, you're even doing super effective, which is quite nice. And you also do better versus the opposing ice types, because you're doing neutral instead of resisted there too. Then as a second move, you could either go with Gyro Ball, which makes you better versus some of these other ice types, except for in a mirror. And as far as ice types go, mirror is probably going to be the most common one besides a Abomasnow, where you don't really need Gyro Ball. So maybe Bulldoze is nice for the mirror. You also have Blaziken with that. You can hit a rock type still with that, but Gyro Ball is quite nice for these other ones and for the rock types too. So it's kind of a trade-off. Depends on what team you're running, really. I think in general you're gonna want Bulldoze, but Gyro Ball could definitely come in useful too. These other ice types are quite good too. I think Regice is gonna be an amazing pivot in this meta. Has a lot of interesting moves: Earthquake, Thunder, Blizzard. Mainly, I assume you're gonna run Thunder, Earthquake. Usually that's just the most like flexible moveset with that. You can hit all the rock types quite. Actually, Blizzard might be good for Cordeli. Oh, this is another tough one actually. I think you want Thunder just for like water types, which are going to be the most common Pokemon. Then Earthquake is quite nice to hit like these rock types and Blaziken. But you might actually want Blizzard just to hit Cordilli, which might be everyone. So, again, a trade-off. I do think this thing is going to be a great pivot, though. And as a pivot, you probably are not going to run Blizzard. If you're running, yes, okay, this is my stance, okay? If you're running this as a pivot, run Earthquake Thunder, because it is very unlikely they're going to switch something in that's weak to Ice. If you run it into in the back or in the lead, probably want Blizzard instead of Earthquake or Thunder. Which one you drop, really up to you, really depends on the rest of your team. But then you probably want Blizzard in order to be able to knock out Cordilli. Boomsnow here, another interesting Ice type, being able to beat most of the rocks. It does struggle versus these three here, unless you're running Razor Leaf, which might actually be the way to go, because then you do much better versus the water types. But Powder Snow is still very nice for Cordilli, so it's tough. Again, depending on your team, I think in general, Powder Snow, Weather Ball, Energy Ball will be better, but if you want to just destroy rock types and water types, Razor Leaf could be an option. Alola Ninetales is quite interesting too. You can run with Charm, you can run with Powder Snow. I think in general you're gonna want to run Charm though. With Powder Snow you really only win Cordilli, whereas with Charm you do quite okay versus the water types as well as versus the opposing ice types, unless you run into a Alolan Sandslash, of course. These two, the water ices, I think are gonna see quite a lot of play as well. They are quite neutral against the water types, and they have the opportunity to beat fire types as well, especially Charizard loses to these two, but Blaziken can definitely be an issue. There's two more Pokemon I want to highlight, not because I think they're particularly good, but because they have very interesting coverage and it could be very fun to run. First off, Barbarigal, which is just very weird Pokemon. It's running Fury Cutter, Cross Chop, and then probably Grass Knot as second move, but you could consider Stone Edge as well. And because of Fury Cutter, you get to this move so quickly. It's a rock type, it's not supposed to beat the waters. It doesn't generally beat the waters, but you can put in so much work with Grass Knot, especially versus like Samurott or Swampert, which are quite squishy. Grass Knot just basically one-shots them. Then because of Cross Chop, you actually have play versus grass types, such as Cordilli and Abomasnow, but you do have to watch out for Ludicolo, of course, because if that thing is running Razor Leaf, you're gonna get absolutely obliterated. Seeking, another water type Pokemon, has some play versus grass types. You want to run Poison Jab on that with Drill Run, definitely. And then Mega Horn, maybe? Or Icy Wind. It really depends. Seeking is a water type that has quite a lot of play versus the Abomasnow. If you're running Poison Jab, Icy Wind, you actually win every single even shield scenario versus Abomasnow, as long as it goes straight Energy Ball. If they bait with Weather Ball, you are screwed. Then Seeking, another water type, that's quite a lot of play for some of these grass types. There's Poison Jab, and then you can run any of two moves between Mega Horn, Icy Wind, and Drill Run, which all give it some unique coverage in general. Because of Poison Jab, Icy Wind, or Mega Horn, it does quite okay versus something like Abomasnow. It's very well versus Alolan Ninetales. It does okay versus some of these other waters. I don't think this is going to be a real star in the meta, but if you happen to have a Legacy Seeking level 50, I think it's gonna be a fun spice pick. Anyway, enough about that. Let's get into the teams. At least that's what I'd usually say, but this video is already much too long, so I'm uploading the top teams as a separate video, which I'll put in the middle of the screen here once it's uploaded. And if it's not, subscribe, because it will come out a couple hours after this video. Anyway, let me know if you enjoy this type of video. Is it too much rambling? Let me know down in the comments. Bye bye.